Okay, we're back. Cole Boston, we're back. Another edition of The Right Call. A lot of our fans were getting a little frustrated with us because we had gone a couple of weeks, but we're alive and well. No need to worry. Agreed?
I would understand why they were worried. I mean, this is such a great show. I can understand they could be having maybe even withdrawals.
Well, that's a great call. That's the right call.
That's the
with
right call.
withdrawals,
That's the right
I
call.
love it. All right, look, we're going to start with, we got plenty to cover in the world of the NBA. We've got some things in the NFL, but we're going to start with Mike Krzyzewski at Duke and the headline, Krzyzewski lashes out at student reporter. And so, Cole, just let's update our fans. For those of you who aren't aware of this story, Krzyzewski had just finished a game. He was being interviewed by a student reporter who asked him to reflect on the next steps after a tough loss. Krzyzewski got mildly annoyed, took a bit of a condescending tone, nothing horrible, and questioned the student and asked the student to perhaps compare finishing an economics exam and then self-assessing what the next steps would be after a difficult economics exam. And Krzyzewski got lambasted in the media and for a tongue lashing. Again, we're back to that word tongue, whatever that means. So, Cole, you heard the clip. I mean, what was your take? I mean, first of all, before we get to the media's role in it, what did Krzyzewski attack the kid? Like, what was your take on this?
Well, I have two takes. I mean, I honestly don't think it was lashing out. I think that's a bit excessive, but I do think that he did use a bit of a condescending tone. I think he did prove a good point. If I can recall, he said, if you had just taken an economics exam and you failed and you walked out and someone came up to you and asked, what's the next step? I'd be kind of frustrated too. So maybe the reporter, he's young, so he's still learning, but maybe the reporter should have realized that wasn't the appropriate time to ask that. But I do think Krzyzewski could have been a little more patient, understanding, and he could have maybe used a little kinder tone, per se.
Well, and by the way, Krzyzewski apologized to the student, called the student after the fact. My whole thing, Cole, is this is preposterous. And this is coming from a guy who teaches adults emotional intelligence for a living. First of all, I've said this time and time again. You're asking professional coaches and players moments after they've invested their heart and soul and energy into a sports competition to come out after they had a heartbreaking or difficult loss, and you're asking them to express their emotions calmly moments after a difficult loss. And frankly, it's a lot to ask. Now, I know there's a standard athletes and coaches are held to. They're supposed to be role models. They're supposed to set an example. And of course, in this case, it was a student reporter, so there's even more of an onus on the responsibility Coach K had. It just, to me, seems like we're altering the tolerance level. Tongue lashing used to be what Bobby Knight did to players in the media. It's what Bob Huggins has done. It's even what Frank Martin has done in the past, a coach I greatly respect. But to say Mike Krzyzewski, who responded a little condescending, clearly he was frustrated, I actually see it not only as the opposite, but I actually think the fact that Krzyzewski thought through giving the student reporter an analogy about an economics exam that he could actually relate to was an actually thoughtful way to make his point.
And it may have even taught him something that wasn't the appropriate time.
Exactly. So to me, I think, and I don't have a problem with the student asking the question, but I think Krzyzewski was entitled to answer the way he did. And so I think the other thing is, Cole, and I know you feel strongly about this, the media's role in this. And, I'm getting a little sick and tired of reading a headline just to get clickbait headline, just to, catch people's attention, even though I recognize it's their job. I mean, what kind of responsibility does the media have in reporting one-sided news?
Well, before I answer that question, I'd like to give you credit for using the word clickbait.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You see my generational skills growing there?
You can just swap from generation to generation.
I really appreciate that. I take that. Thank you very much. Yep. Indeed. Okay.
All jokes aside, I think it's disgraceful what the media does. I think it's ridiculous. I don't think that it's fair to put out false news just for a view. I think it's misleading, and I really think that social media platforms such as ESPN or YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or Instagram should look at these posts and maybe even take them down if they are producing false information, maybe even if they aren't harmful, but we just need to get that norm and environment where it's wrong and disrespectful to put out false information or misleading information just for a simple view.
All right, well, Cole, let's switch gears for a second. We're going to, you and I are both hockey fans, and we don't cover a lot of hockey topics on this show, but I think this is a very timely discussion because the Bruins just played the Washington Capitals a couple of nights ago for the first time. It was the return of Zdeno Chara facing his old team in the Bruins. And there's been a lot of discussion early on about how Chara's still playing 20 minutes a game and he looks as good as new. And the Bruins gave up on him too quick and they could have played him basically pennies on the dollar to resign him. And, I think Bruins fans and hockey fans are missing the point. I agreed with the Bruins' decision not to re-sign Chara for a lot of reasons. Number one, it allowed Charlie McAvoy to elevate his game and step into the number one role of defenseman on the Bruins. And boy, has Charlie McAvoy responded. I mean, each game he's been getting better and better and really playing like a number one defenseman. And when he was paired with Chara, I don't know that he takes that next step because he looked to Chara to fulfill that role. So that's one thing. The second thing is, because of Chara's absence, it's elevated players like Brandon Carlo and Matt Grzelcyk. Matt Grzelcyk's had to step up his game. Kevin Miller's been a huge asset in returning to the Bruins. So a lot of the other Bruins defensemen have had to step up their game, and it's given opportunities to young defensemen like Jeremy Lauzon and Jacob Zaboral, who have been good. I mean, they haven't been great, but for young defensemen, they haven't hurt the Bruins for the most part. So I think we're missing the point. And I want to add one more thing, Cole, on this before I get your take on the Bruins letting go of Chara and how Chara is doing with the Capitals. The issue to me is not, can Chara play 20 minutes a game? The issue is, will he wear down come playoff time due to the miles he's endured in his career and due to playing 20, 25 minutes a game in the regular season? So frankly, if the Capitals continue to lean on him in that kind of role, I expect him to wear down in the playoffs, just like he did in the bubble, where he was exposed several times against the Lightning in that playoff series. And I just think he doesn't have the miles to still endure that kind of workload throughout an entire season.
I agree with you, and as much as I love Z, I just don't think the Bruins were the right place for him anymore. I just think that, as you said, they needed to give the younger defenseman a bigger chance, and I think it's actually great that he went to the Capitals. I think he can be a good defenseman. It kind of scares me that they have Z and John Carlson. It's like a power duo. Even though Z isn't in his prime anymore by a stretch, it's still a powerful duo. So I just think the Bruins weren't the right place for him anymore. I'm happy for him. I hope he succeeds because everyone in Boston, we have nothing against him. I love Z, and I hope he has a great career.
Well, and final Bruins note is they're 5-1-2. It's 5-1-2. They're off to a great start. Pasternak just played his first game. He's been out the entire season. Grzelcyk's been in and out of the lineup. Kasha's hurt. DeBrusk's been hurt. Charlie Coyle just got hurt. So the Bruins have been actually navigating some injuries early on. They've been without their best player, and they're still 5-1-2. And a lot of the credit goes to the goaltending. And I'm not a huge Tuukka Rask fan, but he's been pretty good to start the season.
Before we wrap up the Bruins, I would just like to put something out there that Patrice Bergeron, as good as he's been, we and you were talking about this a few nights ago watching the Bruins, he's just getting better with age. He's just so good and such a big impact on this team that I think the Bruins, when Marchand and Bergeron retire, they're going to be really in trouble. I think that they may even be at the bottom of the standings because they're relying so much on those two vets that when they retire, I think they're going to be in trouble. And I think Pasternak's going to want to leave because I don't think he's going to be part of that team.
Well, yeah, and we see teams in the NHL that have struggled to make the transition when a lot of their veteran stars are gone. We've seen the Blackhawks really struggle, even though they still have Kane and Taves. We've seen the Los Angeles Kings really bottom out over the last several years. So we are seeing that, and we've seen the Pittsburgh Penguins. Even though they're off to a decent start this year, I mean, they have really started. They're kind of at the end of their run line. So you're right, Cole. It's something that how are the Bruins are they going to bottom out for a few years when they lose those two guys? Or are they going to develop some players that can possibly step in? We'll have to wait and see. All right. So let's go to the NFL. Cole, we'll do another podcast this weekend prepping the Super Bowl and talking, but we have to talk about this Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff trade. And for those of you who may have been living in a cave for this week, basically the Rams unloaded Jared Goff, 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick for Matthew Stafford. And there's a couple of things to talk about here. First of all, Cole, let's talk about the fall of Jared Goff. What a disaster he's been the last couple of seasons. You know, I thought he turned the corner a little bit last year. I thought he stepped up a little bit, kind of regressed again. You know, when you watch Jared Goff, he just makes bad decisions. You see him throw just silly interceptions. You see him fumble the ball. You see him take bad sacks. And to me, it's a real red flag that you're regressing under Sean McVay, who I think is one of the top 3 coaches in the NFL. So let's start there. Has Jared Goff regressed? And if the Rams, who are a pretty talented team, did they need to make a drastic move to address the quarterback position?
I just think it was the most lopsided trade I've seen in a long time. I think Matthew Stafford, he's a decent quarterback. He's really never had any weapons since Calvin Johnson's. He has Kenny Golladay. I mean, Kenny Galladay's good, but he's not Calvin Johnson. And I think now that he's going to be on a team that has a serious number 1 in Robert Woods, I think that he's in a serious number 2 in Cooper Kupp. I think Matthew Stafford could take that team to a Super Bowl, although I do think it was a much better trade for the Lions. I think Jared Goff is not that far out from Matthew Stafford, plus they got a couple first-round picks and a third-round pick. So.
Well, and I think that, you know, one of the components of the trade has been that the Rams relieved themselves of Jared Goff's contract and his financial. But the problem is if you read more about the specifics of the contract, the Lions are only obligated to pay him 2 years, and then they can move on from him with limited salary cap casualty. So even that, like the Rams, it's so bothersome if you think about it. The Rams so wanted to get rid of Jared Goff on their roster that they had to overpay to that extent to relieve themselves of a contract they could have been rid of in 2 years. And what this says to me, Cole, is the Rams really progressed this season. They see a window with their current roster, and they're looking at that window, and they're saying Jared Goff can't deliver on that window where Matthew Stafford may be. And I want to switch to Matthew Stafford, Cole, because my feeling on Matthew Stafford is he has had such a lack of stability in coaching in Detroit. He's never had a good defense. He's had a lack of stability with weapons, and he's had a lack of stability just with overall support from the quarterback position. So, you know, this is an opportunity for Matthew Stafford to join one of the best coaches in the NFL. He's walking into an offense that has Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Marcus Altman's personal favorite, and Josh Reynolds. He has good tight ends.
Cam Akers.
And Higbee and Gerald Everett. He's got a stud running back in Cam Akers. He's got one of the top defenses in football. I mean, Matthew Stafford must be pinching himself right now. He must have, when he heard that trade, he must have gone from the outhouse to possibly the penthouse. So is this Matthew Stafford's, obviously it's an amazing opportunity, but for the people who thought Matthew Stafford's been better over the course of his career than he's actually had the opportunity to show, is this finally Matthew Stafford getting his shot to show that he's a big-time QB?
Well, I do, and I'm happy for him too. I think Matthew Stafford has the potential to take that team to a Super Bowl. But what scares me is that I feel that he's regressing a little bit. I think as he gets older, his throw power is not as powerful. He's not as accurate. So I just don't think he's as great as he used to be. But I still think he can take that team to a Super Bowl because that team is so strong in every single position. I would just like to comment. I don't know if any of you guys viewers saw it, but Jared Goff put out a tweet that said, "Hey, I'm new to Detroit. What's here to do?" And Barry Sanders responded with a blank tweet, and Jared Goff was like, "Oh, Barry, I think you accidentally responded to me to a blank. I think you accidentally sent me a blank tweet." And then he was like, "Nope, there's just nothing to do."
Oh, that's a great story. That's a great story. You know, hopefully Barry Sanders and Megatron won't remind Jared Goff upon arrival that they rather retire than continue to play for that hapless franchise. So listen, I feel bad for Jared Goff. I mean, you and I have talked about it. The Lions are one of the worst franchises in professional sports. Jared Goff is not going to change that. And I got to tell you, I've always been a fan of Matt Stafford. I'm really kind of interested to see how that's going to play out because this is the best opportunity of his career. So we'll see how that plays out. Let's switch to the NBA, Cole. And I want to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. And I want to talk about a guy named Doc Rivers. Now, Doc Rivers has the ignominious statistic of blowing 3-1 playoff series leads, which that's horrible, right? But Doc Rivers was a huge fan favorite in Boston, won the championship in 2008, was great with the media, great with the players, really related to the veteran and older players. Then he goes to the Clippers, and frankly, I have to feel like the Clippers kind of underachieved under his leadership, and last year was the most glaring example of that. But I don't feel like Doc really ever got the best out of that franchise. And then he goes to Philadelphia. So the Clippers move on from him. He goes to Philadelphia, and I feel like he has done a great job of changing the culture of that franchise. And there's two things that stand out to me, Cole. Let's do one at a time. First, let's talk about Joel Embiid. So Embiid's always been a great player. We know statistically he's always put up great stats. You know, he had to overcome all the injuries earlier in his career. But he has elevated his game. And if you watch the Sixers this year, it's different. He's taking more of a leadership role. He's not being timid. He's not relying on those jumpers from the outside. He's driving to the hole more. And the thing that really caught my attention, Cole, was the thing that happened with LeBron James and the flagrant foul, and how he spoke to the media after the game and thought it was a raw deal. And he just feels more confident. You watch him. His statistics are consistent. He's driving to the hole consistently. And I think Doc Rivers has really pulled out every aspect of the positivity around Joel Embiid. And I think we're seeing not only an all-star this year, but I think we're seeing now maybe one of the top 5 or 6 players in the league.
I agree. And not only do I think Doc is positively affecting the 76ers, I think Doc not being on the Clippers is positively affecting the Clippers. At the time of this recording, the Clippers are 16-5.
Wow.
So, I don't know. Kawhi's been great. Paul George has been great. So, maybe Doc wasn't the right coach. Maybe he doesn't have the right coaching aspects to coach those two all-stars in Kawhi and Paul George. So, maybe the new coach can really do wonders for that team, but I think the 76ers are really, really an Eastern Conference contender with the Bucks and the Nets and the Celtics.
Yeah, Cole, I don't necessarily think it was that Doc. It's a great stat on the Clippers. Great call on that. I don't necessarily think it's that Doc couldn't coach Kawhi and Paul George. I think he was there for so long, I think he started to get tuned out. And then I also think part of the problem is you got a bunch of punks on that team. You got Montrezl Harrell, to me, who's a selfish clown. You got Marcus Morris, who I've said many times on the show, I detest Marcus Morris. I don't think he's a team player. I think he's a selfish guy, and he stops ball movement. And then you got Lou Williams, who's had some really strange behavior in the last year or so. So I think he had some bad personalities and a bad mix of players. Now, I think Tyronn Lue's a great coach. I mean, I like Tyronn Lue, but I think your point's well taken. Everybody seems to have won. The Clippers have seemed to respond to that. And I'm excited. I like Joel Embiid. He's a guy that's easy to root for. And then the other big story on the Clippers that has kind of gone under the radar is Tobias Harris. And Tobias Harris, played for Doc when he was with the Clippers. And then he gets traded to the Sixers, and he's been good, but he hasn't been great. He's been what the Clippers have expected, but his shooting has been inconsistent since he's been with the Sixers. Now, all of a sudden, Doc is reunited with Tobias Harris. Harris's field goal percentage is up from normally 47 to 51%, but his three-point shooting percentage is up from 37 to 46%. Harris looks like a different player. He's aggressive. He's been consistent. He's hitting his shots more consistently. And even when Tobias Harris was with the Clippers, prior to his being with the Clippers, he didn't do a whole heck of a lot. So talk about a guy who really responds to Doc Rivers. He's now done it twice.
Yeah. And if I can go back to your Tyronn Lue comment for a second, if we can do a little blast from the past here, I think I give Tyronn Lue no credit in that Cavaliers championship he won. I think LeBron really managed the helm of that team. I think he coached the team, and I don't think Tyronn Lue is a really great coach. I just think the Clippers are a great team, and they have and they're just building up. And I think
Well, not to mention LeBron essentially got Tyronn Lue fired when he wasn't happy with Tyronn Lue's coaching. As a matter of fact, LeBron's still the coach. LeBron's the coach of the Lakers. It's not really Frank Vogel, it's LeBron, because everything has to go through LeBron's, rules of engagement.
Hey, I'll be honest here. I agree with you that that's not the way a team should run. But if I was one of the greatest players of all time, I feel like I should have a lot of say in the team too.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's go to rumor mill right now, and there's a lot of discussion that the New Orleans Pelicans are entertaining trading J.J. Redick, who, oh my God, I've been wanting the Celtics to acquire J.J. Redick for 3 years, so I can't tell you how excited I am at this possibility. Now, J.J. Redick's stats are down. He's not having a great season so far, but the Pelicans have a crowded backcourt. So I am ecstatic that the Celtics could actually have someone come off their bench that can be a knockdown shooter, because frankly, Peyton Pritchard gave us a glimpse of this earlier in the season, but the Celtics have so desperately needed a knockdown jump shooter, catch and release shoot guy off the bench for so long. I think this would be a great fit for the Celtics.
I agree, but he's kind of old, and I don't know how much I like him.
He's one of the few Duke players I actually like.
Yeah, but how can
besides Jason Tatum. Besides Jason Tatum. Listen, he is a little old, Cole, but, for the love of God, if I have to watch, and Cole, you hear me harp on this when we watch Celtics games, my biggest frustration and complaint about the Celtics bench is I don't know what I'm getting on a given night from who. Will Grant Williams actually rebound well, or will he even hit his threes? Will Semi Ojeleye defend well, or will he hit his threes? Will Robert Williams actually stay awake during the game and pay attention to what's going on? There's so many guys on their bench that show up sometimes and don't show up other times. I just want to know, when a guy comes in the game for the Celtics off the bench, I want to know what I'm getting. I want to know what I can count on, and I think with Redick, you can do that, even though he is a bit older.
I agree.
All right, let's talk about James Harden. I don't know that we can do a show without talking about James Harden. So I almost wanted to I'm going to play a little dedication sound effect to James Harden. And that is because he had a horrific thigh bruise injury that he needed to take a game off because the poor boy had a thigh bruise. Oh, my God, for the love of God. So you're making God knows how many millions of dollars a year, and you need to take a game off for a thigh bruise? I am so sick of NBA players following the lead of MLB players and being wusses. Can we toughen up a little bit, honestly?
I think you're being kind of rude to James Harden. I don't love James Harden, but I think he's really going to take he's really taken already a big role on the Nets. He's become a team player. He's racking up assists.
Oh, how do you know that? Oh, because he pointed it out? You meaning when he had to announce to the media that he had 19 shots and 19 assists in two games?
Okay.
Yay, I learned how to pass. I'm James Harden. I finally figured out that there's this thing in the NBA called passing. Wow, what an awesome invention. I can't wait to discover defense.
When I'm not playing against Giannis.
When I'm not playing against, yeah, right, because that's the only time James Harden plays defense. And by the way, I know all you stat freaks out there get so excited every night when you see Harden and Durant and Irving filling up the stat sheet, yet they lost to the Wizards last night. They lost a couple of times to Cleveland while we were on hiatus. Yay, Nets. Can we just talk about they gave up 149 points to the worst team in the NBA last night, the Washington Wizards. You've got to work at playing so little defense to give up 140. Unless Bradley Beal is scoring 100 of them, who the heck on the Wizards is going to be able to score that many points to compile 149?
Westbrook.
Right. Westbrook finally had a good game.
41.
Yeah, finally had a good game, finally showed up and actually hit some outside shots. And I'm just laughing to myself because I'm thinking to myself, Durant and more so Irving and Harden, they're all about the stats and all about me. And I want to see them play defense. We know you can fill up the stat sheet. We know you emulate Russell Westbrook in collecting his triple-doubles. But could you just actually try to play some defense? And by the way, I loved how Kyrie Irving said after the loss to the hapless Wizards, he said, I wanted to let Joe Harris missed a big shot at the end of the game. TLC, Luan Cabaret. I don't know the right way to say that. Tyron Luan Cabaret or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Taylor Horton Tucker?
No. This is on the Brooklyn Nets. Luan Cabaret. Kyrie calls him TLC.
Okay.
And it's not tender loving care. Nothing coming from Kyrie is tender loving care.
I just had to figure out the...
Okay, so anyway, the point being, I apologize to our viewers for not knowing how to pronounce this guy's name, but my point is that Kyrie gives his blessing that it wasn't Joe Harris's fault they lost, and it wasn't TLC's fault. I'm like, thank you so much for giving us your permission, Kyrie. We really appreciate that you're not holding the team accountable. And if you could reflect on your lack of defense anywhere in the court last night, which he did, by the way, I will give him credit for that.
Also, Joe Harris had 30 last night.
Joe Harris played for James Harden. I mean, Joe Harris played the James Harden role. I just hope Joe Harris doesn't mix the next game with a thigh bruise, because that would be travesty. All right. Let's talk about the Celtics-Lakers game this week. It was a real opportunity. The game didn't mean much for the Lakers, but it was a real test for the Celtics. I think a lot of people around the league and Celtics fans were looking to see how they stacked up with the Lakers. And there's a couple of things that came out of that game for me. And, Cole, it's rare that I will find some kind of positive spin on a loss, but I thought the Celtics played pretty well in that game. I thought they showed up well. I thought Daniel Tice and Robert Williams actually were solid and contributed effectively. Tice continues to play well. I think the thing, though, about that game that bothered me is, I mean, Kemba Walker, and I know he's still adjusting to the big three and being back, but his shooting has just been abysmal. 1 for 12. I mean, and then Jeff Teague, who I'll get into him in a second, but Kemba Walker missed an open jumper that could have won the game, shot horribly. What do we need to move on from Kemba Walker, or do we need to be more patient with Kemba Walker, Cole? Which is it?
It's time to move on from Kemba Walker. We need to see him have a couple great games, put his value at the top, and trade him for Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, and I have to say, the thing about Kemba Walker is he's such a positive influence around the team. He's such a likable guy. Like, there's nothing not to like. But, boy, Kemba Walker has to be a knockdown shooter on this team. I mean, they just need that from that third head of the big three. So I think that was something. But I did like the play of the big men. Jaylen Brown and Tatum were both fabulous in the game, and I thought the Celtics really did a good job limiting LeBron James in that game.
I mean, I guess. I mean, he almost had a triple-double. He was 3 assists and 3 rebounds away from a triple-double.
But he wasn't a huge factor. Like, you didn't watch the game and feel like he was beating you. It felt like it was Anthony Davis that was really doing the damage.
Yeah, I agree. Anthony Davis is just such a great player. He's such a force down low that he's just so hard to stop. Even if we did have Rudy Gobert, even if we had Nikola Jokic, I'm not sure we could stop Anthony Davis. He's just such a great player.
Now, I want to apologize to our viewers that I will honestly admit that when the Celtics signed Jeff Teague and Tristan Thompson, I was thrilled. I mean, on both signings. I loved it. And I cannot believe how wrong I am. Jeff Teague does not even look like an NBA guard anymore. He's a disaster. He can't hit the broad side of the barn. He can't shoot from threes. He has terrible touch inside. He looks awful. He's not doing much of anything. So we desperately need Peyton Pritchard to come back, and Jeff Teague has essentially been useless. Now, Tristan Thompson looks terrible. He looks slow. He has his occasional bouts of a good performance, but now he's not even beating out Tice or Robert Williams for minutes and just looks old and tired. And so, again, we're back to the same old problem. The Celtics really struggling with the bench. Marcus Smart is now out for a few weeks. Luckily, it could have been a torn Achilles, and it wasn't, thank goodness. But, again, the pressure is on Danny Ainge as we approach the trade deadline in the coming month or so. What's he going to do with that trade exception? How is he going to strengthen this bench? I look at the Lakers. I look at the Clippers. Heck, the Lakers couldn't even get Markieff Morris or Wesley Matthews. They couldn't get Markieff Morris or Wesley Matthews. They didn't even get any playing time the other night. They don't have any room to play them. But that would be a nice problem for the Celtics to have Markieff Morris and Wesley Matthews and not have room. So, look, the Lakers have a bench. The Clippers have a bench. The Bucks have a great bench. The Sixers have a really solid bench. The Celtics bench is a black hole right now.
I agree.
That's all you got? You agree?
I just agree. I think you said it all. I think the Celtics bench is abominable. I think, as much as I love Semi Ojeleye, I played video games with them, but He's just not a great fit for this team. I mean, Semi Ojeleye is a fine fit for this team, but everyone else get out of here.
Yeah, and Cole plays Fortnite with Semi
I
Ojeleye.
used to.
He used to play Fortnite. He doesn't play Fortnite, but I've asked him repeatedly when he's talking to Semi Ojeleye in Fortnite. I've asked him to why he can't play more consistently. I've asked him to challenge Semi to understand why he can't play more consistently.
Yeah. As much as I love you, Dad, I'm not trying. I like Semi Ojeleye, and I want to keep playing with him. So I'm not trying to get me blocked.
Okay, so I'm going to just end the show with a final thought today, Cole. And I want to talk about a stat that just came out comparing Jaylen Brown and Kevin Durant. And that after this is Jaylen Brown's 5th year in the NBA, and they compare Jaylen Brown's stats in his 5th year in the league with Kevin Durant's stats in his 5th year in the league. They're virtually identical. As a matter of fact, Jaylen Brown in some of the stat categories is better than Kevin Durant at the 5-year point. So are you buying or selling that Jaylen Brown is going to be as good as Kevin Durant?
I'm buying it. I think Jaylen Brown has shown so much improvement over this year that I think that, 1, he could be an MVP candidate by the end of the year. I think 2, he might evolve to be the best player on the Celtics by the end of the year. And 3, I think he could be the one to really step up and lead them to a championship this year.
With their current roster as constituted?
No, I think they're going to need...
Because that would not be the right call.
I think they're going to need a Kemba Walker for Rudy Gobert trade, and I think they're going to need to sign people like J.J. Redick and maybe a few shooters and maybe a few rebounders. But if they make those changes to the team and Danny Ainge steps up and Brad Stevens can be not a total dip and he can actually coach well, I think the Celtics are a championship team seeing... What are you going to say?
Well, I'm just interested in the reference of a total dip. That's an interesting reference for Brad Stevens,
He's
a total dip. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Keep going. Finish your point.
No, I was just saying that, I just think that if they make the moves they need to make and Jaylen Brown continues on the path he's on right now and Jason Tatum plays like himself, I think the Celtics they can go anywhere.
Cole, is there any truth to the rumor before we sign off? Is there any truth to the rumor that part of the halftime show is going to feature NFL legends, including Algie Crumpler? Have you heard that rumor at all?
I haven't heard that rumor, but I wish that was true. I think that would bring in a lot of viewers, and I think that would definitely get my attention.
Well, and I think Travis Kelce has clearly patterned his game. And Gronk. I mean, what an opportunity for Kelce and Gronk to be near their idol, Algie Crumpler, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's it for the right call. Great to be back, and we'll look forward to seeing you both next time. For seeing you all next time. For Cole Altman, I'm Mark Altman. See you next time on the right call.